Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Education USA Thursday Live. We wish you all a very happy International Education Week that starts from November 18th till 23rd. As part of this International Education Week, we have many events that cater to the needs of students who aspire to go to US for their higher education. So one such session today is interdisciplinary approach to higher education in the United States. I'm Shanti Mohan and I work as Education USA advisor with US India Educational Foundation. So before we go ahead with the session, here is a brief introduction about us and International Education Week. US India Educational Foundation, in short USIF, is established in 1950 through a treaty between the two countries, United States and India. The mandate of USIF is to promote mutual understanding through educational and cultural exchanges. The two main programs managed by USIF are Fulbright and Fulbright Nehru Fellowships and Education USA. Education USA is a program that's funded by Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, US Department of State. It's a global network of 400 plus centers in 170 countries. Mandate of Education USA is to provide accurate, comprehensive, current, and unbiased information on US higher education to international students. In India, there are 7 Education USA centers, and out of which 5 of them operate under US India Educational Foundation. The 2 independent Education USA centers are in Ahmedabad and Bangalore. Here is a quick note on International Education Week. Every year, International Education Week is celebrated mostly in the 3rd week of November. And it is a great opportunity to celebrate the benefits of international education and exchange worldwide. So this is a joint initiative of the US Department of the State and US Department of Education, where they do programs that prepare Americans for a global environment and also attract future leaders from other parts of the world to United States. So for more information on International Education Week, you can visit the iew.state.gov website and know the various programs that are conducted world over. Some of them are in-person events, and some of them can be virtual events. Every year, as we celebrate the International Education Week, the Institute of International Education, a not-for-profit organization, releases Open Doors Report, which is a comprehensive report on international students moving to US and American students studying abroad. So as per the report that is recently released, in the academic year 2018 to 19, there are close to 10,95,299 international students are currently studying in the US, out of which 18.4% are Indian students, which is equivalent to 202,014. So it's definitely increasing every year as the interest of the students to go and study in the US. So having given you an introduction to the International Education Week, now I'm coming back to the core thing of the session today, interdisciplinary approach to higher education in the United States. So before we actually start the main session, I will give you a brief introduction to what is this interdisciplinary studies is all about, and then just state few examples, after which we will be meeting our speaker for the day virtually. This is a short definition on interdisciplinary studies and multidisciplinary studies. So interdisciplinary studies primarily enables you to select few of your interest and combine them and create a study program. Most of the time, the students would have multiple interests. So some interest would be more shaping them more towards the profession. Some could be a passion. So the interdisciplinary studies helps you to combine your profession and passion and create a program that helps you to be more successful in your career. There is a very fine line difference between an interdisciplinary studies and multidisciplinary studies. In the case of interdisciplinary, we probably have a more definite structure, whereas in the case of a multidisciplinary studies, I can put it like you can create your own program. So there is no set of a predefined coursework or anything in this, but you need to understand what is your specific educational objective, or let's say a career interest, and accordingly you will combine your interest to create a program. Before we understand how these programs are offered, first tip that if you're interested in, let's say, an interdisciplinary or a multidisciplinary, make sure the university that you're planning to apply do have either a department which supports the interdisciplinary studies or multidisciplinary studies. So most of the universities do have such resources available for you to avail those opportunities. So I have just given few examples of interdisciplinary fields and new programs that you may come across in many universities. Again, this is not a level-based studies, meaning you can either do it at your undergrad, an interdisciplinary program, or even at your graduate or a PhD level, you can go for an interdisciplinary program. Many of the things that I have listed here, you may be very, probably quite familiar with them. And of course, this list is not very exhaustive, and you can add many things like, especially among the students who are in STEM, engineering management is one such program that a lot of people are familiar with. The other thing, like even if you take, for example, data science, the in thing that everybody wants to pursue, data science can be like, it can combine with biology to give you like a biostatistics, or it could be absolutely a finance-oriented data science. So it's up to us to do a thorough research on what do we want to study and what is our future goal, and accordingly you can combine several fields of interest. As I told you, multidisciplinary doesn't give you a very defined structure, but these are all few things as an example I can give you. So one is cognitive science and artificial intelligence. Of course, most of you would be familiar with that. And it's just not computer science, it has psychology, neuroscience, mathematics, and logic combined with that. Even in this, you can go one more level and have a specialization, like suppose you want to go for a medical related artificial intelligence, or you could even say an aerospace related artificial intelligence. So it's up to us to fine tune the selection of subjects and everything, okay? So is with the environmental hazards and emergency management. So you can make out there is a whole list of subjects that are involved in this. So likewise, you can create your own interesting programs, and you can be very successful at the end of it. This is one classic example from Brandeis University, wherein they are just listing their most popular interdisciplinary programs and who would be a good fit for these programs. If you look at the combinations that are given here, the basic approach to any of the interdisciplinary program is that the student must have an interest to multiple fields, and they must have, let's say, a broader approach to, say, concepts and things like that. The advantage of having such an interest is that there is a intellectual growth which is not limited by any sort of a barrier, and you will be probably doing well in multiple fields as well. And this is the current trend also. Gone are the days where students are just doing only computer science or just doing only mechanical engineering. Everybody needs some sort of a specialization, or they want multiple skill sets so that their career prospects are much better, and they make themselves more competitive for the future world. The second example that this program can be at the undergrad level or at the grad level. So you can see the interesting combination of subjects like film, television, and interactive media, women's gender and sexuality studies, neuroscience and psychology. So you name it, probably if you think about something, you can even combine environmental studies with interactive media also, if you want to create an awareness about saving the environment to people. The next is from Drexel University. This is one particular program that I'm showing as an example here, which is integrated biomedical engineering and business. Again, they offer this degree at the undergrad level, but at the same time, you could also go for a graduate level program in this. But there is a requirement in this, in the sense you must have some foundation in engineering so that it's easy for you to work on this program. And if you need more information about universities that offer interdisciplinary studies, you could you could visit a website called petersons.com and give the keyword as interdisciplinary studies, and you would find list of universities which are offering such programs for you, either at the grad level or at the undergrad level. Okay, so far we have understood that there is no such particular list or definition of, say, a coursework or subject for doing an interdisciplinary studies. It's basically like, as an individual, how do you see that you are, how do you see to connect these two fields? And what is that you really want to achieve after doing the program? Or how do you want to get benefited by the program? So this is the one which actually helps you to create the interdisciplinary program. Today we have with us Shri Panikar, who will be joining us virtually. And there he is. So before Shri starts the presentation, I have a quick intro about him. So that would help all of you to know what he's doing currently. Shri is a 2019-20 Fulbright Nehru Student Research Scholar to India. He is a recent graduate from the University of Michigan with a BS degree in neuroscience and music production. Since 2016, he has worked as a research assistant in the Raghavendran Research Laboratory at the University of Michigan Medical School. He's also been learning Mridangam, all of us know mostly, a classical Carnatic percussion instrument, for more than 13 years. He is currently conducting a research on assessing the availability of essential trauma care resources and the quality of trauma care across different types of hospitals in Kerala and India. Having said that, I don't think we will have a better speaker than Shri and who is a standing example of doing interdisciplinary studies in the US. So over to you, Shri and we are eager to know how you went through this journey.
Cool. Thank you so much for such a great introduction. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you. I think right now I'll switch to the presentation so you guys can start to see what I was talking about. Okay. Cool. So today's presentation, as I like to call it, is thinking with both halves, bridging the interdisciplinary gap between the arts and the sciences. So quickly, just a quick intro. Hi, everyone. My name is Shri Panikar. I'm currently in Kochi on a Fulbright Nehru Fellowship. And so my project looks at trauma uniformity in Kerala healthcare. I'm very interested in knowing if standardization could benefit trauma care in Kerala. So how consistent are the guidelines and regulations regarding emergency care in Kerala? So like Shanti mentioned, I recently graduated from the University of Michigan with a dual major in both neuroscience and music production. But before we dive into things, I think it would be, again, interesting to talk about what is an interdisciplinary education. So the way I have it written is, to put it plainly, an interdisciplinary education is one that covers various curricular disciplines while centered around a common goal. And I think that's the key phrase, common goal. Multidisciplinary educations, for the most part, from my experience, are more students that have multiple interests, and so they pursue various topics simultaneously. Whereas interdisciplinary educations use diverse fields of education for a common centralized goal or effort. And so most commonly, students will mix a STEM major with a humanities major. So STEM is science, technology, engineering, math, And the humanities include language, studio arts, performance arts, any other areas of study. And I think some of the most common interdisciplinary experiences that I've seen are business/engineering programs that I've seen are offered in the University of Michigan and University of Pennsylvania. And these are pre-constructed schedules where you opt into a program and the university itself constructs your schedule. It tells you which classes to take. But at the same time, an interdisciplinary education can be a very personalized experience. With a little bit more effort from the students' end, they would have to find out the classes they have to take, and they would construct their own educational experience. But I think that you can't really compare one or the other. It's not necessarily that a pre-constructed schedule is better than one that you make by yourself. I myself made my own interdisciplinary education because I had both of these interests, and I was curious to see how they both relate to neuroscience and ultimately medicine. So, talking more about myself, why neuroscience? It's here's a simple little fact that I always like to think about. The brain is the only organ that named itself. So for me, when I was extremely young, maybe I was in 3rd grade, I went to my dad's library and I grabbed this book called Phantoms of the Brain. It was just circumstance. But the book was a very fascinating collection of case studies of patients that had very abnormal and unique brain conditions. And so some patients had unique development of autism that made me artistically gifted. Some patients had amputated limbs, but they could still feel those limbs even if they weren't there. The book clearly emphasized that the brain was one of the final frontiers of science. We don't know what we're capable of as human beings. We aren't entirely sure as to how or why the brain operates the way it does. So the potential of discovery is immense and exciting. So I really wanted to practice medicine and I wanted to pursue neurosurgery from that point forward. So from what I understand in the Indian educational system, you can practice medicine for 5 years in undergrad, known as MBBS. In the US, that same phase of time is called pre-medicine, and it's only a precursor to medical studies. MBBS has clinical rotations, but pre-medicine is mostly just a theoretical understanding of the sciences. Its purpose is to prepare you for medical school. So, as a major, neuroscience allowed me to cover these general sciences, but it also offered me the opportunity to really delve into the forefront of neuroscientific research. But most importantly, studying neuroscience allowed me to pose an important question, which I'll come back to a little later in today's presentation. Why do we think the way we think? And I think an interdisciplinary education is really important in that framework. And so why musical production? Music, on the other hand, seems like it's the complete opposite of science and neuroscience. Growing up, my mother and my aunt introduced me to play mridangam at the age of 7, and I started playing drum set at the age of 8. And truth be told, I was not athletically gifted, so practice became a daily ritual for me. And then in college, when I was spending a lot of time, hanging out with friends and looking how music production is made, and today, I started delving into the basics of digital audio production. And so for anyone who practices music, you guys will know what I mean when I say that playing instruments, it can be hard sometimes to cross over different styles. Even Hindustani and Carnatic, it's very hard to bridge those two styles, even though they just come from the same country, right? So I always wanted to bridge my mridangam experiences with my traditional Western drumming patterns, but they never really meshed well. And so I was curious, I went out of the way and I talked to a professor at the University of Michigan School of Music, Theater, and Dance. And I talked to him about my interest in music. And he's the one who suggested music production, because in digital audio production, you can combine multiple styles effortlessly. And from there, I started my journey in studying music production, audio engineering, and I was able to continue my study of mridangam. And I've also included my SoundCloud link on the bottom, just as, a little shout out, because that's where I like to upload my music. So I think an important part to contextualizing my experience in undergrad is what it means to be pre-med. So I'll tie back in on how music ties into this as an interdisciplinary education, but I was first and foremost a pre-medical student, and these were the essential classes that I had to take. Fortunately, my neuroscience major covered all these general sciences. So you can say that a neuroscience is a pre-medical major. It is a major that is oriented towards preparing a student for medical school. So year 1 and year 2, they cover the general sciences: chemistry, physics, calculus, biology. Some of these classes you can actually skip with a concept called AP credit. AP classes are offered in high school, and if you take those classes and you take an exam called the AP exam, and if you do well on this exam, the exam is out of 5 points. If you get a 4 or a 5, you actually get college credit for that class. So as I was in high school, I took the AP chemistry and AP biology exam. So I didn't have to take these classes, during my first year of undergrad. But organic chemistry, touching on that topic, this class is notorious for being a class that's extremely difficult. You'll in every single major, whether it be computer science, law, medicine, you'll have weeder classes. These classes serve as a barrier of entry to the pre-med curriculum. And the idea is that since anyone can join the pre-med curriculum, certain classes are purposely difficult to keep students out. So then year 1 and year 2, they build on the general sciences. In year 3, you get into the advanced sciences. These include biochemistry, physical chemistry, genetics. And between year 3 and year 4, that is when most students take the MCAT, or the Medical College Admission Test. It is an exam out of 528 points, and once you get your score, you're eligible to apply for medical school. And the exam, from what I remember, has 4 different parts. The first part is chemistry, then you have reading comprehension, then you have biology, then you have psychology. And these are the 4 sections that make up the Medical College Admission Test. Most often, you'll need experience in the general sciences and the advanced sciences before you can take that MCAT test. And then finally, in year 4, you can delve into higher studies. Sometimes these include graduate level classes. Sometimes these include independent research directives, included immunology, neuroscience, and anatomy. So on a macroscopic scale, as a pre-med, the educational experience wants to really push you towards the forefront of science, right? What does our most modern scientific understanding look like? We start from the basic and we work towards the most advanced concepts. My experience was just a little different. What I've included here is a traditional experience for pre-medical students. Because I was able to skip a few classes, I was able to do all the classes in year 1, 2, and 3 in my first 2 years. So then between year 2 and between year 3, I was able to take my MCAT. That way I could spend years 3 and 4 on both my musical studies and my higher neuroscience studies. So this is a snapshot from a typical schedule I had from my first semester in my 3rd year. RC Arts 288, that first block you see, that was my class that focused on music composition and musicology. It covered basic music theory and introduced me to how music production typically works. The only downside is never ever sign up for a 9 a.m. class. You have to wake up very early and it's not fun. After that, I have MCDB 436. This was a higher studies science elective, which focused on immunology. And it taught us about immunological research and what the current field looks like. And it kind of brought us up to speed with modern research. Afterwards, I have Biology 222. That was an advanced neuroanatomy course, which focused on teaching us more modern and relevant neuroscientific concepts. Because of my prior studies, I was eligible to do a master's course in neuroscience, which you can see on the Tuesday block, which is called Neuroscience 570. And then finally, my last class was Composition 415. This class taught me more about audio engineering and the basics of mixing and mastering and using audio equipment. So as you can see, for the most part, there's a pretty even blend of musical classes and neuroscience classes. And there aren't really, any classes that do both at the same time, but I'll talk about why it was important for me to do both of these. So initial experience. At first, both of these experiences were completely opposite. I would say that studying neuroscience and doing pre-med is a very organized, very rigid experience. The classes you have to take are extremely clear, there isn't much area for experimentation or change, it's not a bad thing, but your path is very standardized and it's laid out because you have to prepare for medical school. So every class was organized neatly into 3 or 4 exams with clear lesson plans and standardized curves for grading. So my studies were very analytic, rational, and they were normally long periods of reading lecture slides and textbook. I would like to say that pre-med classes or computer science classes or business classes, STEM majors in general, they're very oriented towards informational exchanges. Studying music, on the other hand, was very open-ended and almost undefined. There were certain classes that taught technical skills, but a majority of the artistic education is focused on self-directed studies. I spent a great deal of my time producing my own music and practicing my mridangam in hopes of achieving a clear understanding of the music I like to create and how to create it consistently. So to kind of summarize, neuroscience was a very rigid and very planned route, whereas studying music was much more self-directed, and I get to choose the path that I was on. So before I delve into kind of the meat of what an interdisciplinary education is, I think a small neuroscience lesson would be extremely impactful here. When it comes to the benefits of an interdisciplinary education, I think neuroscience does the best job of explaining its benefits. A common anecdote is that our left brain is logical and our right brain is artistic. This isn't false, but it's somewhat of a simplification. Our left brain is focused and it's very goal-oriented. It likes consistency, it likes repeatability, it likes to classify and predict. It likes explicit information, and it doesn't like to create information that's undefined. The right side of our brain is far more about seeing the larger picture. It's focused on broad patterns, it's focused on implicit categories like emotional expression and understanding abstract ideas like art and music. So one of the questions that I had when I was studying neuroscience is, how do we work both halves, right? How do we get better at it? There's no way we'll get to live all of life using one half or the other, right? More often than not, we'll have to kind of use two. And so what does being interdisciplinary mean? I would say it is focused on the holistic education of the individual and not the holistic education of a subject. Neuroanatomy is very different from electronic drumming, but there is an area of overlap. These areas aren't separate from one another. They're contributing to my holistic growth. So the concept of critical thinking, whether it be computer science, medicine, law, every field is based on specialized foundational knowledge. But at the highest level, they require critical thinking, right? Creating new solutions and creating new ideas, when there haven't been any. So an interdisciplinary education doesn't focus on just the left or the right half of the brain. It uses both, right? That interdisciplinary education is how we learn how to critically think. We learn how to make solutions because we have a wider experience base. So I'll get into more detail about that. Crossing streams with critical thinking. How did my neuroscience education and how did my musical production education, how did this help me in real life? So I brought up the idea of critical thinking and being interdisciplinary, but let me kind of give some examples. My musical education was mostly experimentation as a means of introspection. So anyone here that knows Carnatic music, that knows jazz, that knows any field of music, music production is a very spontaneous experience. There's a lot of introspection, there's a lot of practice, right? You have to think extremely quickly on your feet. In Carnatic music, there's a concept called manodharmam. And in manodharmam is improvisation, right? It is creating art on the spot. And as a mridangam player and as a jazz drummer, you have to constantly adapt to these ideas. So how did I take the spontaneity and how did that I apply to my neuroscience studies? The same thought occurred to me while I was studying for a neuroscience exam. So far too often, we focus on the subject material we study. Why do we study the way we do? Is there a better way? What's the best way for us to learn? So I realized that what does manodharmam, or what does improvisation, and what does neuroscience, what do these concepts have in common? I realized that ultimately these concepts are focused from a neuroscientific perspective. See, the idea is interdisciplinary studies took the immediate focus off of studying just a subject, and it started introducing larger questions about what I studied and how I integrated my studies for the future. There's a larger perspective in American education, and specifically with interdisciplinary education. So most importantly, in both of these areas, how am I developing as an individual? How am I able to critically think in improvisation? How am I able to critically think in my studies? So how am I developing as an individual? What skills, talents, and abilities am I gaining from my experiences? The fundamental idea I want to really emphasize is like ideological versatility. So being extremely versatile and flexible with thinking. I think having my interdisciplinary education gave me the experience to quickly adapt to new circumstances, right? I'd say that it's a very useful ability to have, and I'll delve on that a little more. So here are some other examples of being interdisciplinary, which I hope will kind of really, draw my point home. So case one is Vivek. He's a real person. He's my best friend. He's studied narrative writing, biomolecular science, and the Spanish language. And he is also pre-medicine. So he's currently studying at the University of Chicago Medical School. And he's using his experiences to work in underserved populations where Spanish speakers are more prevalent. And he's using narrative writing to chart his medical experiences. So his studies, helped him kind of realize the kind of doctor he wanted to become, and it's still applicable in his activities today. So case number two is my other best friend, Juhi. She has a bachelor's in business administration as well as a degree in biomolecular science. And she's currently working for a Huron consulting group. So she's using her experiences as pre-medicine and in business to work in healthcare consulting. And she plans on later attending medical school where she can use her business experience to branch into hospital administration. So in both of these examples, instead of simply saying, I want to be a doctor and I want to do this, they have far more specific visions, right? They know exactly what they want to do. And in turn, they were able to plan for this experience and take certain classes and kind of engage in an interdisciplinary education in preparation for their future. So after talking about them, here's a holistic snapshot of some of my activities. So I was part of Michigan Sahana, which is a classical arts organization that fostered my social skills as a leader, as a team player, but it also allowed me to foster my individual skills in Mridangam. And then I was also part of a science learning center. I was able to tutor other students in biochemistry. But at the same time, it was also a lesson in thinking. Very often we're students and we don't really understand the other perspective as a teacher. So I was able to see the unique ways in which people process and receive information. I was also engaged in research. I worked in genetic therapies to heal patients. So part of this was, part of my pre-medical educational curriculum, where I got to learn more about the forefront of science. And then in volunteering, I fostered social skills and gave me the knowledge as to how hospitals in the US operate and what role I can play inside of them. And then as a shadowing, when I was shadowing medical professionals, I could see how they operate on a day-to-day basis. So I could see what skills they had and what skills I would need when I eventually became a medical practitioner. And finally, I practice in martial arts to take care of my physical health and really work on integrating new information. I think it's the best way I can describe it is martial arts was a very new experience for me. It was completely unlike anything I've done before. So I had to really think and I really had to adapt to that new circumstance. So a return to roots, my Fulbright work. So my Fulbright project looks for uniformity in careless trauma care system. How standardized and how consistent are the protocols and equipment? So my study is a large-scale analysis of medicine and medical perspectives of Kerala. How do the different cultural perspectives affect the perception of medicine? It's a combination of the portion of humanities and the empathic awareness of art, because I had to talk to doctors, I have to talk to patients, but at the same time, there's a rigorous focus on analytics that I need for the scientific validity to my study. I have to constantly think on my feet, right? Because I'm explaining my project to doctors and obstacles can arise at any given situation. So again, I like to think that my interdisciplinary education really gave me the basis for spontaneity and adaptability. That's what it really prepared me for. So at the same time, it also makes my Fulbright project very multifaceted. It's not just, visiting hospitals and seeing how hospitals like to do emergency care. I get a chance to perform at local temples and Carnatic concerts. I get to shadow doctors at local hospitals. I get to volunteer at any different experience I get my hands on. And interdisciplinary education gives me the basis to engage in more multifaceted experiences. So it fosters an interdisciplinary growth, if that makes sense. So not only will I be a better prepared physician, I'll be a far more cohesive individual who can do more activities affecting change on a larger scale. So pointed towards the future. In the immediate future, how do I see these skills helping me, right? At the end of the day, how are my experiences better preparing me? Through my education and through my Fulbright experiences, I have a wider set of perspectives to draw from. Hypothetically, as a doctor, I can connect to patients not only through medicine alone, but perhaps through music, or perhaps through culture, perhaps through any number of perspectives. But the idea is that an interdisciplinary education gets me used to critically thinking and thinking on my feet. It makes me extremely adaptable. So at the same time, the more ideas and experiences I'm exposed to, the more receptive and open-minded I become to other ideas as well. There's a concept in American education and interdisciplinary education. It's a positive reinforcement cycle where the more ideas you're exposed to, the more open-minded you become. In a sense, it becomes easier to learn when you're working in interdisciplinary. So the thesis, the crux, the main idea. Don't focus on the subject. Don't focus on the niche, right? Far too often, I think I've seen a couple of my friends, they simply just focus on computer science. They focus on everything they can do. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not denouncing that. But I'm saying that I think it's far more impactful to holistically look at yourself. What kind of person with what kind of skills do you see yourself having in the future? And what will help you get there? So don't just, confine yourself within the constrictions of, oh, I want to be just a doctor. I want to be just a lawyer. I want to be just an engineer. Look at the different talents that you may have and how they can all come towards one direction into one point. I want to say it's not the degree, it's the individual. And that's my presentation. Thank you so much. Any questions?
Thank you, Srihari. That was really great. Great presentation, and thanks for explaining the need for interdisciplinary studies. I think that's what everyone requires more than talking about a structure to it. I think we'll now open out the floor for more questions. Just stay with us. We will find out who is going to have the first question to you.
Sure.
Srihari, you can actually stop sharing the screen so that we will come back to the webinar.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you. I can use this.
Good afternoon, Srihari. This is Rajan from Chennai. My son is an IB. He is applying to US universities. His passion is physics, and of course, he has equal interest in bass. He is in music as well as he is into philosophy. Probably he's looking for ideas, in physics, philosophy, maths. In this context, in fact, he has been researching various websites. How does this interdisciplinary stream, match with the open curriculum offers that, say, for example, Columbia offers or U Chicago offers? Is it one and the same, or what would be your insight?
Sorry, could you repeat your question one more time? It's just a little tough to hear.
Okay, yeah. Fine. Yeah. See, how does this interdisciplinary stream, compare or match with the open curriculum offers? Say, for example, Columbia, it says, it has a niche in open curriculum stream. They say it is their centennial year of open curriculum. Brown, they say they offer open curriculum stream. U Chicago, they kind of, say that is their USP. How does this compare,
So what you're asking is an interdisciplinary education versus an open curriculum.
Correct. Yes, you're right.
Okay. No open curriculum. What I think is great about the interdisciplinary education versus the open curriculum is that the open curriculum actually, from what I understand, is the curriculum prerequisite list of subjects, correct? Including one course in English, one course in math, one course in physics, et cetera, et cetera. Ultimately, I think it comes down to specialized knowledge. So I have a couple of friends in Chicago and I have a couple of friends in Columbia. So we talk about our classes all the time. From what I understand, in their educational experience, they have a far stronger fundamental basis in all these subjects, but in the limited time of 4 years, they have less time to spend on specialized education. So at the end of the day, it's about how many higher level classes can you take, right? How many graduate level courses can you take? And when it comes to an interdisciplinary education, you're not constricted to taking classes you don't want to take. You get to delve into your subject of interest far faster, and you kind of get to the interesting part far quickly. Whereas an open curriculum really, favors a strong basis in having split fundamentals, right? It covers all of the basics very strongly, but at the same time, it takes away time that you can spend on higher level classes. So there are pros and cons to both, but that would be my kind of understanding of the two.
Any other questions? Anybody here?
Hello?
You can talk. It's on.
Shri. Okay. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
While applying, should we have to propose, should we have to write a research proposal? If yes, how should a research proposal be? Like, what are the contents?
So when applying for an undergraduate or applying for a graduate study?
Yeah, a PhD.
I don't know too much about PhD studies. I think more often than not, I'm pretty sure that PhD studies and PhD admissions are dependent upon if you have an affiliation with the research laboratory. So that means you must have not a proposal, explicit proposal, but you have to have a professor who can hopefully help you and set up a basis for you with the idea of a future project in mind.
Okay, thank you. Now, you would have written a SOP, right? You would have written an SOP, statement of purpose. What should be the contents be?
Oh, that's a heavy question.
Yeah.
That depends on what your project is. That depends on what area of field you're studying. I think the best course of action would be to go on the internet and find any programs you're interested in, PhD programs you're interested in. Look at what the prerequisites are. Maybe they need a proposal, maybe they don't need a proposal. But most importantly, get in touch with a professor that you're interested in working with. And from there, they can guide you.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say when it's applying to PhD admission is purely dependent on the faculty member with whom you would like to associate for this research program. So the first thing you need to do is identify universities where they're conducting the kind of research you're interested in. Second, find out their contact details from the department page and send them an email sharing your resume, which basically details all your previous research experience, and tell them why you're interested in doing research which is similar to the work that they're doing right now. Then you must send them in your research, in the resume that you send them, clearly articulate what previous research work you've conducted and what is your interest in future for the kind of research that you wish to do and how it dovetails with the research that is going on in the department, particularly by that professor and his team. So that's something you must articulate. The research statement which you will submit with your application to a research program can be a detailed statement. It doesn't have to be a 1 or 1.5 page sort of statement, which is typically what an SOP or a statement of purpose will be if you're applying for just a master's program. But the research program, you should clearly articulate what your research interests are, how you intend to integrate your interests with those of the work that's going on in the department, what is your research trajectory or path forward for the research that you intend to complete, and what resources that you're looking for that particular research. You must articulate. If you're trying to figure out how to identify professors who are doing the work that you're doing, ideally I would say please go and look at some scientific journals in your particular field of study. See who are some of the professors who have authored publications in your particular research area. See if there are any of them from US universities. If you find that, then please go look up their profile on the university website. Their contact information as well as their research profile will be provided on that department page. After that, initiate a contact and share your resume and then take it forward from there. At the research level, it is purely in interaction with the professors.
Yeah. Any more questions? Yep.
Hello? Hello, yeah, good afternoon. So I would like to know how the, of course, we're going to do completely two different courses, right? Like, say, medicine and also music. I want to know, like, how the industry sees us. Like, do we adapt to the industry or the industry adapts to us, or do a freelance? So I just want to know how the industry looks at us.
That's a question I'd love to answer, actually. So currently, I'm actually applying to medical schools right now in the U.S. I'm getting interviews. It's a long process, but I can tell you right now that medical schools, from what I've seen from my friends who are in engineering and in the medical school application process, industries want multifaceted people. They want people who can think in multiple areas. I think the days of wanting specialized, high GPA applicants, those days are done. I mean, you still should have a high GPA and good studies, don't get me wrong. But the idea is they want to see that you're a human being capable of interacting beyond just academia alone. They want to see what other experiences you can do. Because at the end of the day, these are the people that are able to connect with others and work on a team and able to deliver projects most consistently. So I would say both from an industry perspective and an individualistic perspective, being holistically well-rounded is the current emphasis.
I'd like to share an example of a student who recently wrote to me. He completed his master's in computer science, but his project was on researching hurricanes, and it was published in a scientific journal in Israel, which was also working, he was working with a few colleagues from Israel who were working on this, figuring out about hurricanes and things like that. And the student is now working in Oracle, and in a startup environment. So I don't think you need to so much worry about should my course be in relation to the job that I'm going to be doing. I don't think even industry is looking at it like that, because careers and job profiles are also changing. Industry is also very dynamic nowadays. They're looking at people who bring a broad range of perspective with them to the role that they're performing, and not just looking to see whether you have the computer science, you've ticked off that box, and whether you have the mathematics or not. I don't think even industry is looking at profiles, student profiles that way. So I think it's a question of your passion and your interests and how you can integrate that in the field of study or career that you wish to take in future. I think that's what you should be looking at.
Anybody else would like to go again? There's a request for our online viewers. Keep posting your questions, please, and we would be more than happy to answer. Yeah, you have a question, so you can.
Hi, Shri. I'm Aparna, another Education USA advisor and colleague of Shanti. A lot of times our students that we are advising want to know how can they figure out what kind of interdisciplinary courses to pick for, because they're not very clear sometimes on what they want to major in or specialize in. So would you suggest that they should randomly explore all general education courses and then figure out what would be their field of interest? Or is there a method to the madness in figuring out how to combine multiple courses and come up with an interdisciplinary program?
So I have a funny anecdote that I use. An interdisciplinary education is kind of like jumping out of an airplane and making the parachute as you're falling, if that makes sense. So the idea is experimentation is necessary. It needs to happen. But at the same time, there's a critical amount of time that you can experiment before it becomes too late. So again, the idea is you want to be hitting those high-level classes as soon as possible, right? But at the same time, you want to make sure that you're doing something you're interested in and that you have a strong basis in both fields of study. So my best advice is from a STEM major, the average timeline is a STEM major takes about 3 years to finish, assuming you're only doing STEM. And if you're doing an arts major, a humanities major, that takes about 2 to 2.5 years to finish. So if you're doing both, it takes about approximately 4 years to finish, or it can take a little longer. But I would say that the experimentation phase should last about 1.5 years maximum. So you have 3 semesters to take different classes, to see what you like, see what you don't like. But I should also say that by the time you're already in undergrad, you should have an inkling of what you like and what you don't like. I mean, I would recommend against diving into something completely new, right? I knew I liked music for a long time, so it seemed like a natural extension of who I was. But I think it's, I'm not denouncing it by any means. But I would recommend against diving into a completely new experience which you've never done before, because it might be a little harder to get to the higher level classes in time of graduation.
I have another question to you, Srihari.
Mm-hmm.
So, as an extension to whatever you explained about the structure of the interdisciplinary programs, did you plan for this in the beginning when you started applying to the colleges, or you were more open-minded and went as an undeclared major and then you chose to go for neuroscience?
So my original plan was actually only neuroscience. I loved neuroscience when I was in 3rd grade. And I always practiced music, but I never ever considered studying it as a formalized, major. My interest came from the fact that, this digital audio production held the potential for me to, combine both Western drumming and mridangam. And because I talked to that professor, he helped me figure out my classes. He helped me schedule, what classes I would have to take for the next 3 years. And through that, I was able to join the program. And because of that, now I'm able to, again, think critically. I'm able to think on the spot. I'm able to adapt to situations far more quickly. It's a different, unique experience, which I'm very grateful for. But I would say that it's a happy circumstance. It's a happy accident in that sense, which is why, again, I think that period of experimentation of about 1.5 years is very important, because you have to see, if your hobbies and interests can stand on their own as a formalized area of study. But at the same time, if you spend too long, then you run the risk of, having the same college long where we're not finishing on time.
Thank you.
In continuation of your response, Srihari, I'd just like to know is, when at the undergraduate level, when a student comes in as a freshman student, and they're still figuring out what their subject interests are, should they really be connecting with an academic advisor to ask them what options to select, or should they really be feeling their way around and then maybe approaching someone? What would you suggest to a freshman student?
So, if you want my politically correct answer, it's always going to be talk to the academic advisor and they'll help you out. But as an honest student, academic advisors sometimes aren't the most effective resource. They're overseeing thousands of students, so sometimes they can't give you personalized attention. What I would actually recommend is talking to a professor of a subject you're interested in, and they'll be able to give you the focus and the attention you want. And then from there, what they'll do is they'll direct you to other students who may have similar experience or similar background to you. And those other students will help you figure out your course and figure out what you need to do. So to kind of summarize, I would want to talk to the professor instead of talking to an academic advisor.
Thank you, Srihari. I think we have come to the end of the session today, and
Cool.
Very happy that you are able to answer most of our questions and with a crisp presentation as well. It's always good to have a personal experience so that, the experience helps you to describe it much better. That's what I feel.
Yeah. I'm glad I was able to talk to you guys today.
Yes. Thank you so much. And you please stay on with us as we are going to give our contact information and other things to the viewers online and to those who have joined us here at the American Center today.
Of course.
Yes. Many of you have already watched most of our online sessions, and however, we would like to give you back the contact information and how do you reach out to the Education USA Chennai Center. and also about our future sessions. Next slide, please. Yeah. So you can connect with us in various ways, and most of the social media, you can find our existence. And as an add-on, there is an Education USA India mobile app. We encourage all of you to download it to get the accurate, comprehensive, and current information on US higher education and the application process to US universities. As I mentioned in the beginning of the session, we are celebrating the International Education Week. And as a part of it, our next session this week is US University Alumni Fair. That's happening on Saturday, November 23rd from 2 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. The venue is at Indo-American Chamber of Commerce, which is in Venkatakrishna Road, Mandavali. Please do join us and meet the 15 US University alumni and know from them the experience of studying in the US and how did they shape their career and what brought them back to India and being very successful. So we encourage all the participants here today and those who have joined us live to do attend the US University Alumni Fair on Saturday, November 23rd. And thank you so much for joining us today, and we really appreciate the time and also the questions asked by you. And do stay tuned with Education USA for any further queries on US higher education. Thank you all.